Oh, it's prey. Or how did they know I always wanted to be a coffee cup?
I've been thinking about objects, because we treat some of them so badly, often the most important ones. I was thinking about objects as I played the game Prey, as I turned into objects while playing Prey. There is something, too, seeing beyond our own little corner of being, something more crucial than Spock's good of the many ethical stance, because it goes well beyond humanity. However comforting it may be to see ourselves as the universe's top dogs, it is deeply unethical from the perspective of anything beyond humanity. One philosophy challenging these age-old anthropocentric assumptions is object-oriented ontology, abbreviated OOO, often called OOO, though I personally like saying OOO. Turns out it is very difficult to think the human as being in equal standing with everything else. See there? I did it again. Everything else. Like the universe and everything in it can be reduced to a metaphysical category of simply not me. That this is somehow a valid ontological position seems absurd, and yet it is the foundation of most philosophy.
It's finished.
Yet, as OOO asserts, objects don't need us to think them. They continue on, regardless and heedless of us, even when our beings collide with theirs. More and more, objects are thinking in a way we are more likely to recognize. The kinds of virtual intelligences that control non-player characters in games, for example, are turning up in cars, buildings, and refrigerators. If we don't start wondering about the impact objects have on us soon, we may be blindsided by the result. One way we might helpfully communicate OOO's significance is through a medium that already relies on objects: video games. For the most part, games merely replicate human superiority as an overlay for whatever fantastical world they portray. But in some cases, games have tried to do more, have tried to show us that we are living alongside numerous beings we ought to recognize as such.
Sarah, you're next.
Set in the year 2025, Prey cosplays as Morgan Yu, a scientist that finds herself, or himself, trapped on Talos 1, a space station overrun by a race of highly intelligent aliens called the Typhon.
With a sophisticated setting built to accommodate classic RPG mechanics we don't see often enough in modern games, Prey feels both new and nostalgic at once. A wonderfully explorable science fiction environment proves dense with interactive systems, intrigue, and ever-present danger.
Talos 1 is kind of glamorous and unnerving at the same time. It's lonely, but it's full of stuff. There's lots of stuff everywhere. And Prey really does...
The starting enemy is a mimic that can disguise itself as small objects, so you're merrily searching a desk for old dictaphones and breast milk pumps when a mug jumps up and sticks its tongue down your throat. Then it runs out of your field of view and starts nibbling your bum while you blindly spin around looking for it, smashing your wrench about, and you feel like a gorilla in a phone booth with a wasp. The next enemy...
The founding principle of science fiction consists of pressing on this idea of the meaningful encounter with the more than human. And the video game Prey is no different. Prey is a simulation of a simulation which you thought wasn't a simulation anymore. Which cave are we in again? It calls into question the assumptions that the alien antagonists are evil, even if they would almost certainly destroy all humans if they were to reach Earth. It lets you play at being as object, but unfortunately goes no further than that.
It's finished. All the directives.
I've been reading Ian Bogost's Alien Phenomenology, which advances a theory of object-oriented ontology he calls tiny ontology. Before describing it, we should understand what he's pressing against with this idea. Within object-oriented ontology, like any other theory, there exist many ideas about what will solve our human-oriented calamity. One of them is flat ontology. Bogost writes, "We can distinguish the ontological status of computer program as code from game as play session without making appeal to an ideal notion of game as form, type, or transcendental. The power of flat ontology comes from its indiscretion. It refuses distinction and welcomes all into the temple of being. Another variant within OOO, and perhaps the most famous, is Bruno Latour's actor network theory. Latour believes a thing is what it does, and that everything is real insofar as it has an effect. Actors can be volcanoes, fictional characters, people, hailstones, logical impossibilities. For Latour, there is no surplus outside of its acting. A name of a thing is only a nickname for a series of actions that a thing undertakes. Timothy Morton, by contrast, focuses on ecological networks, using the term dark, as in dark ecology, to get away from actor network theory and toward OOO, claiming that things are more than what they are doing right now. For Morton, something is held in reserve, and Latour's actor network theory does not account for this. Morton's idea is closer to Heidegger's thingness. For Morton, as with Heidegger, thing is not ever entirely expressed, especially if it is operating as intended. There are problems with a position like flat ontology, which sees everything as equal. Stuff simply isn't equal. Some things are just bigger, broader, more interconnected with other things. For example, Morton talks about hyperobjects, which are so big in comparison with the human they are difficult for us to even fathom. Dissatisfied with what others have offered in OOO, Bogos suggests tiny ontology as a way to handle the simultaneous complexity and simplicity of beings. Bogos doesn't even like the words thing or object. He favors unit for not being so philosophically charged. Where flat ontology brings everything down to the same plane, tiny ontology brings it to a point. He writes, "It's a dense mass of everything contained entirely, even as it's spread about haphazardly like a mess or organized logically like a network." Bogos continues to bring up Graham Harman, who is another OOO scholar. Bogos writes, "As it happens, Harman also compares the thing itself to the black hole. Every object, says Harman, and this is a quote from Harman, is not only protected by a vacuous shield from the things that lie outside it, but also harbors and nurses an erupting infernal universe within." That's the end of the quote. Flat ontology suggests that there is no hierarchy of being, and we must thus conclude that being itself is an object no different from any other. The withdrawal of being is not merely a feature of yogurt or tonsils or Winnie the Pooh, but also of its very self. The embroiderable shorthand for tiny ontology might read simply is, but only because semantic coherence cannot be contained in the tittle atop the I alone.
The door jamb. The empty summer lawn where the fall leaves collect. The paint on a shed. The thumbs that hold photographs. The indifferent asphalt. The park bench that cradles without care. The bricks unsusceptible to sorrow. Object-oriented ontology is a first principles philosophy, one that adds a focus on individual entities to the rejection of the human world correlate. The orientation in OOO normally modifies ontology, which is oriented toward things of all types and scales. That's the abstract part of the metaphysics, and we need it. But we also need the concrete part, the metaphysician's practice. Object-oriented ontology is thus not only the name for an ontology oriented toward objects, but a practice of learning how to orient towards objects ourselves, and, mise on a beam-like, how to orient toward object orientation.
We're gonna shake things up, like old time.
Couch. controller, cup. Flat screen TV, PlayStation 4, compact disc, protective case, power strip. When I play games, I am also an object. But games go to extreme lengths to convince me that I am special, powerful, central. I get to choose, they tell me. I get to fight the bad guys. I am the hero. Humans are deeply charmed by this. Games present us with the chance to be more than our often disappointing selves. But at what cost? Telling ourselves the same stories of human superiority over and over again has not prevented us, against all logic, from destroying the natural world that supports our lives for the sake of profit. Our obsession with heroism does not stop us from fearing people from cultures not our own, religions not our own, socioeconomic backgrounds not our own. We often dehumanize people who are not us. We do it easily, without thinking, often without questioning. How can we possibly be expected to think objects in any kind of ethical way? But behind the curtain, I am no more than just another line of code. Not much more complicated than the game's other thinking machines. No more important than its interactive environments. Sometimes in games, things happen to me that I can't control. And for a moment, I will be reminded that I am not the center of the universe. But even that's a lie. Moments like those are meant to contrast with the usual illusion of choice that is the norm in games that make me feel powerful. Really? When the game takes away my agency, all it shows is that I never had any notable power in the first place. The sleek and warmly lit Talos 1 space station is littered with contorted corpses, their horror-stricken faces locked in the pain and shock of their digital deaths. I'm not sure if these deaths could be considered to have occurred. Since the plot didn't call on me to witness them, they were designed in this inanimate state, posed by the developers for me to find. They were never the more or less lively AI avatars most games non-player characters tend to be. What am I supposed to feel? All the corpses have names, but it doesn't stop me from shamelessly looting them. Sorry, not sorry, Bianca Goodwin. It's a game. They are objects. Okay, I'm an object too. I'm Avatar, being of immense agency, empty being, filled only while played, powerful but only in this one digital space. Do I even exist outside of play? What an anthropocentric perspective. I'm thinking of my avatar as a shell, but my in real life self as what? Full? Whole? Alive? Special, certainly. This game can't play me. As I wander through the ink-stained, alien-infested lobbies, offices, and labs, I can't help thinking,
are not we all just objects in the end, our bodies ultimately disintegrating to cosmic dust?
What makes us think we aren't objects right now? We make a big deal about objectification because society values subjecthood, but what if we considered ourselves objects all the time? We would have to change how we argue for human rights, or anything's rights. Less of a
humans are special, so respect that
golden rule style position, and more like,
what makes you think you get to treat things like shit? You're just an object too.
What is so special about life, sentiency, having a soul, whatever it is philosophers claim makes us us, that justifies animal testing, factory farms, millions of acres of pollution, continuing to drive cars. Looking at Bianca Goodwin, I think it sucks that these digital people had to die in space, that their bodies can't nourish the earth. But space dust is also cool. Maybe they could be swept up by a comet or something. Now, on to the next alien monster to cover in glue and then bludgeon to death with a wrench.
Why am I doing this again? Oh right, for fun.
Populated his entire crew with customized operators. He made the mistake of hanging his hopes on a machine. Flesh and blood is messy, Morgan, but it's the only thing that matters in the end. The upload just kicked in. Meet me in the operator.
Server arcs
We have an important work to do.
encrypt.
As object-oriented game experiences go, Prey does stand out. It poses the player important questions. Do I exist? Is this, too, a simulation? What is that lovely golden spiderweb hanging in the air anyway? Which weirdly named AI should I trust? Can I even trust myself, or my previous self, the one who's telling me I should self-destruct to save the world? Should I rely instead on the player's survival drive? Can I even win this game? Prey is very ooey as games go, because players can level up by injecting themselves with alien bio-goo, which allows them to turn into objects. But then it isn't as ooey as it could be, because when you turn into a coffee cup, you can roll across the floor. Pretty sure that would freak out any caffeine enthusiast. So even objects in this game are getting to be more like animate life, rather than animate life being considered to be more like objects. The only game that does anything similar with objects is the indie game Everything, in which players can become any object in the game just by interacting with them. They can also hear the thoughts of objects. Objects that you speak to or think to will turn even if they are inanimate and as though they are looking at you. Everything calls attention to the object's thingness by not employing realistic physics or behaviors to objects, just as Prey does. For example, when the player is a Rocky Mountain elk, they roll across the landscape instead of running or jumping. Both games have to remind players of what they are by using third-person camera work, too. Without that, players would no doubt imagine themselves, or at least as humanoid. They would have a hard time remembering what form they're taking on right now if they couldn't see it all the time. Prey shifts to third person only when a player uses a Typhon power to turn into an object. In the end, Prey is just another anthropocentric narrative whose main question revolves around what makes us human, claiming in rather cliché fashion that it's our empathy. Adding alien powers to humans through the neuromods was all fine and good, sort of. But in order to stop the Typhon from wiping out humankind, the key was adding human neuromods to the aliens. Oh, and really quick, important spoiler, you are a Typhon, not a human.
You spend years trying to put what you can do into us. You never tried putting what we can do into you. Until now.
That fundamentally disenfranchises any of the other beings, from coffee cups to the Typhon, which deserve to exist just as much as anything else. This type of storytelling, the player-centric, anthropocentric kind, doesn't really allow players to experience the life of an object, nor do neuromods that give them any insight into the lives of the Typhon, who are just the objects of research, not objects unto themselves. Everything does a better job of this, though it's not perfect. The physics that call attention to your thingness and highlight that your thingness is in the context of a game and not the real world may give players a chance to introspect regarding their own being in relation to others. In fact, that may be the entire point of the game. There is no heroism, and there are no quests other than seeking out other beings to listen to and potentially become for a time. In terms of storytelling, that is entirely up to the player. The stories that get told are stories that the player discovers for themselves, They are not just along for the ride on someone else's perfectly crafted narrative, as in most games. So in terms of OOO, what Prey hints at being possible, everything potentially realizes. But that judgment's really up to you.
The sound of awakening. In between the bated breaths before the turning of the page, the sense that everything's about to change. Just